How's it going, guys? The Pretty Boy Offense here. My name's Saj, and we are about to do our Week 7 review of the NFL season and how it relates to our survivor picks. So, I had kind of mentioned before in our preview of Week 7 of the NFL season, that this was kind of like a super lackluster week. Not only were a lot of teams on bye, but we also just had some like really terrible matchups that, weren't the most like appealing for just casual watchers of the NFL. There were only maybe like 2 or 3 games that actually looked like interesting from like a standings perspective and like competitiveness. But the rest of the games, they were great for Survivor. A lot of like heavy favorites. And then even with some of the games that thought looked closer, which were between like two bad teams, I think there's a lot of great information that came out of those games with, with the way those teams lost, the way some of their players kind of came out of that game in terms of like trade rumors and stuff like that. There's a lot that we can like really discuss here with a lot of these. So I'm not gonna hold back too much. I'm just gonna really just like talk about a lot of this stuff because we're at the point in the season where we know what teams are. We can start appropriately like analyzing their schedules and really just buckling down for the rest of the Survivor season. All right, so to start, we'll talk about this one game that we didn't learn too much from: the New England Patriots versus the New York Jets. Mike White has to come in for Zach Wilson. He got injured. He's going to be out about 2 to 4 weeks. How does this affect the New York Jets moving forward? It doesn't really affect him too much. I mean, he was on a situation where he was just supposed to learn this season. They've got Joe Flacco coming in to replace Mike White as a starter, which I think is a good move. How much does he know this offense? Like, not a lot or like not at all. But the thing with Joe Flacco is he's a veteran, so at least this way with a veteran, you can put in some like really vanilla basic concepts and the execution level will still be relatively, competent with a guy like Joe Flacco. He's won a Super Bowl. He's, a fine quarterback. He's exactly what he is right now. He's not expected to lead into the playoffs or anything. So in terms of like fantasy perspective, I think that's like a bump up for like Corey Davis and stuff like that on the New York roster. Mike White was throwing it a lot to the running backs, so that was like super nice for fantasy, but I think that'll change. I don't think Joe Flacco's going to be doing a lot of dump offs. So the Patriots as well, though. Sorry, I just have all my notes here, just trying to read it off. The Patriots, they're going to be this team that I think they win the games they're expected to win, lose the games they're expected to lose. And when you're talking about it, that sounds like super obvious, but when you're talking about a team that's like challenging for an AFC playoff spot, with how competitive the AFC is, you need to win games that you're not supposed to win, and you need to cheat your record that way in order to get a good enough record to make the playoffs. So ultimately, I don't think New England ends up making the playoffs, and having an outlook like that is important because as we then start getting down to, we have to start thinking about when we want to take certain teams, and if their season's like over by the 3 or 4 weeks before the season ends, they might be playing like backups. They might be trying out guys that they think could make the roster for next year. Like, that's stuff that's like still relevant, stuff that we have to know. I think another thing I'm going to talk about in a game that we saw later on that I'll talk about with the Rams and the Lions is that their coach Dan Campbell, he's not coaching to lose games. He's actively trying to win. And what I'm seeing with Rob Saleh is like he's not really pulling out all the stops with his rookie quarterback, with his like players and stuff like that. They've still kept it fairly safe, and like they're trying to be as like professional as they can as like a franchise in terms of like play calling and stuff. Whereas you compare that to like what the Rams are doing, where they're doing like fake punts, going for it on like more fourth downs and stuff like that. And like granted with Zach Wilson, the execution, the success rate's like so much lower because that guy has so many turnover worthy plays, and they actually do get turned over that it hampers their team too much. But you have to start like seeing what you can do. You gotta start trying, and I just don't even see any effort at all in this Jets team. They just get beat up. They have a decent defensive line. They've got some decent wide receivers. They have Michael Carter, who's a talented running back, but they haven't utilized anything in an appropriate way. So just we're going to be picking against the Jets moving forward. And with New England, I think this was like the last good time that you probably had taken New England for the season. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting with them moving forward. Maybe if there's another like juicy matchup that we could take them, but still not a lot of confidence in New England to pull off any upsets or anything like that. All right, so the next game, Washington Football Team versus the Packers. This was a game I really wanted the Packers just to run away with and destroy, like the football team with, because they've kind of been a team that's like been a little hot and cold, and I don't mean from game to game. I mean literally within the same game, they go from being like Devontae Adams like super dominant, like Aaron Rodgers connection with them, or Aaron Jones is having like an unreal game, to being this like anemic offense that struggles to move the ball, can't really figure out their personnel decisions and stuff like that. It's really awkward watching the Packers. And then you see what Taylor Heineke did in this game. I'm not a fan of Taylor Heineke as a starting quarterback, and then I like have bombarded the football team with you know, what should be criminalized. Like the fact that you're okay with starting Taylor Heineke this many games is just ridiculous. Yeah, they stuck around this game long. I was watching this with my friend, and they stuck around way longer than they should have in this game. They had chances to to draw this game closer, and just because of like turnovers and stuff like that, this game was just really sloppy. So again, we're never going to be taking the Washington football team to win games, especially because their defense can't even hold up its end of the bargain, let alone their offense. Taylor Heineke just doesn't have the arm for it. He doesn't have the vision for it. He doesn't have the timing for it. Just everything's like one step back. I feel like if this guy was ever in like the AFL or XFL or something like that, he would do fine. But in the NFL, it's not good enough. And in regards with the Packers, yeah, you want to see them just destroy them with like Devontae Adams going against that secondary, and they didn't do that either. So like, I'm starting to like have some stock go down on the Packers right now. I'm not too confident in any situation. If they have to go against the Vikings, I wouldn't trust them to win. And they have to play the Cardinals on a short week, and there's a big COVID issue with that team with their defensive coordinator Adams, and I think Lazard as well. So, they're going to be. I'm going to be staying away from them as much as I can until I can see some more concrete stuff out of them. And the other thing is the Packers. There's kind of been like a big note of like, oh, they're on this like big win streak since they lost to the Saints. They lost to the Saints, but then they like beat the Bengals in overtime with like that terrible kicking game. So put an asterisk by whatever that win means. Then they beat the Lions, they beat the 49ers, they beat the Steelers, they beat the Bears, and they beat the football team. That's not an impressive like run of the game at all. So they're about to play Arizona. Yes, they're like undermanned and stuff, so you have to take everything that happens in that game, with like a grain of salt and stuff like that, or a big heaping like pinch of salt. But that's not okay. That their schedule is going to get tougher, and I don't really know if we can actually trust them with that like rap sheet they have, and just like believing what your eyes see. Okay, Atlanta, Miami. Not too much to say in this game, just because we mentioned the Tua talk. And how they're talking to Watson right now, and they kind of want to get that Watson deal done, and I think appropriately so. I think Tua's looked good this year, or good enough this year to like kind of like if the team had more patience, then yeah. But I feel like this team really wants to win right now, so that's like not gonna happen. Yeah, it's just a weird situation. I feel like just developmentally they're a little bit all over the place. I think they have some like veterans on their team that really want to take that next step and they really want to utilize. But some parts of that team are just so young, especially that O-line is just not ready to protect. So we're not going to touch Miami, like I said, until we get some like clarification on what's happening on the trade scenario. And as long as that trade buzz is going around, I'm not comfortable taking that team with a quarterback who thinks he's like playing his last game every week. Then the next thing with Atlanta is Pitts looked great, 160 something yards, and he looked like a wide receiver. So they started finally doing what I mentioned with Pitts, where it's like, yes, he's a tight end, but he's a pass catcher. He's just an offensive weapon. Just use him like that. Stop thinking about him within the confines of like the tight end mold that we have. Just use him to move the ball down the field, and yeah, he does that. He's good. Not good enough to help Atlanta become more bettable. Even in the NFC South, maybe against like the Saints and stuff. The Saints and the Falcons started looking like they're getting a little closer now, so maybe we can't even pick those games. But yeah, kind of like the way Atlanta's trending. They can keep up that that offensive identity. Matt Ryan's slowly playing better too. I was really critical of Matt Ryan at the beginning of the season, but he's starting to play much better. These last, I think, about 3 games, he's like put up some good stats, like around 300 yards, couple of touchdowns every game. So good for Matt Ryan. That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to get into 2 of the games that we had pegged as like some of the most important games in terms of the NFL landscape, which are KC versus Tennessee and Cincinnati versus Baltimore. We'll start with Kansas City versus Tennessee. Sorry, I should have said AFC landscape, because these are four of the biggest teams in the AFC right now. Or I should say most important teams. Kansas City is not one of the best teams, but they are one of the most important teams in the AFC. And we're starting to just see the reaction that Kansas City had to losing that Super Bowl last year was that they had to fix their offensive line, and they 100% did. I think everybody knew that they had to do it. But the way they went about it in addressing their offensive line was admirable in a sense, but it was also like ignorant of them to think that was the only issue, because their defense was still terrible. Like, their offensive linemen weren't out there playing cornerback. Their offensive linemen weren't out there trying to make tackles. Your defense was bad last year. You've made the personnel decision of moving, Chris Jones or whatever to the outside instead of playing D-tackle and stuff like that. So you screwed yourself that way, and you're constantly making bad personnel decisions when it comes to defense. And I compare it to the way Jacksonville, when they made their like miracle run to the AFC Championship game, and they thought that they were the only thing that they were needing of to becoming a Super Bowl team was a running back, because it was like the one thing they lacked in that season, because their defense played good, their offense played good, and then they go and they take Leonard Fournette in the first round, where it's like, no, it wasn't the running back that was the issue. Running back is like a luxury piece, but you didn't like the positive side of like all these like 50-50 outcomes that your team had for that whole season. You should have been getting another cornerback. You should have been getting a quarterback. You should have been getting like all these other things, but you didn't, and you went and got a running back. And the running back, when all those other factors of your team like came back down to earth, doesn't solve any of those things. And that's kind of what I'm seeing from Kansas City. And when you're comparing Kansas City's management to the same management styles like Jacksonville, like this whole franchise, this organization is kind of crumbling under its own like weight. And there's this really interesting stat here where Patrick Mahomes has had less turnover worthy plays this season than he has in the past years, but he's thrown more interceptions this year. So that's just like I said, where on those coin flip like passes where it's like contested catches and Tyreek Hill was coming down with them, Travis Kelce was coming down with them. Now they're not coming down with them. And this is something that, like, stats are backing up what I was talking about with Patrick Mahomes, where, yes, he's taking those chances, but, like, good quarterbacks and bad quarterbacks take those chances. And the reason bad quarterbacks are called bad quarterbacks is because their coin lands on tails. And good quarterbacks' coins land on heads. And, this year, every time Pat Mahomes takes that gamble, he's just losing out. So he's just coming back down to earth. So it sucks. Patrick Mahomes is still super talented, but it's kind of feeling like maybe... And this is wild to say because he has Kelce and he has Hill. But in the NFL that it is now, you need more than that. Because teams are finding ways to stopping Kelce. Teams are finding ways to stopping Hill. And now there's no confidence in Pringle or McCole Hardman. They don't have Sammy Watkins anymore. Clyde Edwards-Helaire never really turned out the way they kind of wanted him to. Williams isn't the running back they need. So maybe they're like lacking weapons. I think that's an issue. So in terms of like survivor moving forward, I have no faith in Kansas City. Hopefully you guys were able to use Kansas City earlier and weren't saving them up. I think there's still opportunities for them to kind of get on a bit of a hot streak, maybe win a few games, but I mean, it's been consistent. They've been the same team every single game. We talk about teams playing up or down to opponents, but this has been a bad team every single game, the same bad team every single game. So concerning, super sad for all those Kansas City fans. I know they've been through so much hell in the past, finally got a good team, and then you're seeing this happen, and it's just like you should have seen this coming from a managerial standpoint. And just looks bad, looks really bad. All right, and then the next team, there was another team in this game, Tennessee. They're kind of the opposite, right? I had them pegged as like one of the worst teams because they were playing so bad, like slapped by the Cardinals, losing to the Jets, but now they're 4-2, playing great. Absolutely dominating the way Tennessee is built to dominate, and their O-line has so many injuries, they're still playing great. Their cornerbacks injured, they're still playing good. Now, mind you, the same way we talked about the variance and like a lot of those Patrick Mahomes plays and a lot of those Kansas City plays, the Tennessee Titans are getting the benefit of a lot of variance and getting like the upside of it. So moving forward, does that domination continue the way it should in terms of like cornerbacks and O-line play? Probably not. But the stuff that we can bank on, which is A.J. Brown and Julio Jones having an incredible like catch percentage, Ryan Tannehill being one of the best quarterbacks or being the best graded quarterback from a clean pocket this year is, that's not variance. That is a stat, and that is something that will hang on the whole year because that's something Tannehill has been his whole career. And then Derrick Henry being the best running back in the NFL is also something that is like a stat that is tried and true and will, be an absolute force moving forward for Tennessee. So I'm loving the fact that we didn't take Tennessee early. They got those hiccups out, and I'm so comfortable taking Tennessee as like one of my top teams now as we move on in the season. They look great, and it's everything you want in a team that kind of built up its value in the first, I guess it's almost like first half of the season now. So that's great. Kansas City, don't touch them. Tennessee, stocks up, look great. All right, so the next game, Cincinnati versus Baltimore. I was completely wrong on this game, guys. I thought for sure Baltimore, their blitz was their exotic blitzes and stuff like that, the amount of times they were gonna bring blitzes was gonna be enough to get to Joe Burrow. I thought if Joe Burrow was like statistically the best quarterback against blitzes in the league, then he had to show it against the team that blitzes the best in Baltimore. And he did. And I think a lot of the production was also like yak yards, like yards after catch. So that means if someone catches like a 8-yard pass, they take it after the 8 yards because of the 8 air yards. So they catch it like 8, but then they run like 20 more yards down the field. That's yards after catch for anybody who doesn't know. It was it played into the fact that Baltimore had a lot of injuries in their secondary, and they're an injury-plagued team. But they've also been doing it all year. They would have done this to a healthy secondary. They would have done this to anybody. Jamar Chase is a weapon. He's done it to everybody. Joe Burrow is a magnet to him, and he's throwing it to him as best as he can, and it's working. I have some stats here. So on 39 of Joe Burrow's dropbacks, he was blitzed 15 times. That's a lot. That's a lot of amounts, and that just meant that his wide receivers were in man-to-man coverage or like fairly tight coverage, and Jamar Chase just manhandled Humphries and stuff, and I was completely wrong. I thought Humphrey would have been able to take him out. So that's I think a good question right now to have is Jamar Chase one of, or is he the best receiver in the league? And not going by stats or anything, just going by what you see on the field. Like, this guy's just doing it all. This guy's contested catch guy. This guy's yak guy. This guy's like catching all these air yards and stuff too. So I think that's really important. Now the most interesting thing about the Bengals here is they played great for this first half of the season, but they have statistically the second easiest schedule up until this point. The Ravens game was like the crutch and the move on. From this point on, they have the second hardest schedule in the NFL. So as high as I am on the Bengals and how great it is to see them playing well, I don't know how much their stock really goes up because the level of opponents that they're going to be facing is going to get higher. The games are going to get harder. So they'll still win games, but how reliable are they going to be? How easy is it going to be for us to determine if they're going to win these games, week in, week out? And at some point, if you're as good as they are, you're going to become better than all these teams anyways, and your hard schedule, will still be winnable. But in our terms of like Survivor, we have to know how to discern what will be a good game for them and what would be a bad game for them. So I'll do a full breakdown of their like upcoming games in another video. Don't want to make this one too long, but it's super interesting. Just to keep that in mind before we get too high on the Bengals. And then on the Baltimore side, their offense is living and dying by Lamar Jackson, and I mean I think that's what this is. I think this is kind of like they're playing with house money this season with all the injuries and stuff like that, and I think that's fair to say. So Lamar Jackson's allowed to take these chances. You're either going to win because Lamar Jackson's doing incredible things, or you're going to lose because Lamar Jackson's trying to do too much, and like games kind of get away from you. I think this game was one of those situations kind of similar to the Chargers game that Baltimore just played against the Chargers, where the Chargers lost that game, but was it really like as big as the score made it seem? Like, no, because like the fourth down decisions, you're trying to force balls in on like certain throws, like when you're already losing, to try and like get yourself back in the game, so it gets out of hand quickly. Is that like a good indication of what the gap is between the two teams? Probably not. It's exaggerated. Baltimore's still like a good team, but we have to be very wary taking them in any future games just because of this volatility that Lamar Jackson could have, where it's similar to Patrick Mahomes, where if you're asked to do so much for your team, then yes, there are going to be games where you're just not getting the benefit of those 50-50 balls or those, like, roughing the passer calls, etc., that, like, those things that extend drives. So we'll keep that in mind, but no reason to panic on Baltimore, and let's temper our expectations a bit on Cincinnati moving forward because of that strength of schedule. The other really interesting game, I kind of talked about it a little before with the the New York Jets, New England Patriots, but the Detroit LA game, the Lions versus Rams, not much to talk about here. Good team versus bad team. We say that a lot, but I think it was pretty appropriate in this. In a game where Detroit did absolutely almost everything they could to keep the ball, to keep scoring and stuff like that, and to keep the foot on throats of the Rams, it took 2 calls not going their way in terms of like interception and like a fourth down and stuff, and the Rams just consistently just were better with all their drives, could score easier, did all their stuff. But Detroit's trying, we can't fault them for that. Something to keep in mind then moving forward is there was Raymond kind of had a pretty good connection there with Goff. So when Amon-Ra St. Brown comes back and everything, does their receiving core become a bit more relevant? Does that help them win games? I don't know. I think it's still Detroit. I think they're still a bad team. I think we still just pick against them. And then when it comes to the Rams, I mean, good team. If you've still got them, save them up for when it's relevant. They'll have some games against some, relatively easier opponents, and you'll have a good chance to use them. But yeah, the next game, one of the games I hated, one of the games I wanted you guys to stay away from, Panthers versus Giants. This was a rough one. I rewatching this, I was keeping up with the score while it was going, and I was thinking to myself in my head, I'm not gonna want to watch this. The Daniel Jones catch was absolutely insane. I can't believe he did that. The other big news, Darnold's getting benched for PJ Walker, which is, not good. So I kind of want to talk about Sam Darnold first. I like Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold could be a decent quarterback in this league. I think the ship has sailed on him being given any starting role or being given the benefit of the doubt now. Yes, it sucks that Christian McCaffrey's out. Yes, it sucks that the offense is probably hampered by it. But Sam Darnold is making bad decisions. Sam Darnold is late on throws. Sam Darnold is staring down receivers, and he's not helping his team win games. So in terms of survivor, that is a big point against. Daniel Jones, on the other hand, is doing everything in his power to win games for his team. He, like I said, is receiver proof. He was missing weapons in this game, still produced. This Panthers defense came back down to earth. They're not the best defense in the league. People wanted to anoint them after 3 weeks. It was absolutely insane that we were even talking about that. Yeah, and then talking about the Deshaun Watson stuff, we had to talk about this. The Panthers are one of those teams that are rumored to be interested as well in Deshaun Watson. And, if Deshaun Watson goes to the Panthers, we'll address that when it happens. But for right now, the fact that we know that they're interested in Deshaun Watson just goes to show the turmoil and the kind of manic management that's going on behind the scenes. And as long as that's what's going, kind of the same as Miami, you don't want to touch them. I think they kind of leveled out. They kind of had that big spike at the beginning. They traded for Gilmore, but he's not going to fix any of the problems. The problem is the quarterback. The problem is McCaffrey not being there. The problem is Robbie Anderson dropping passes. The problem is everything on that offense that isn't DJ Moore, which is, a shame. But in terms of the Giants, defense is playing good. The defensive line is stout, but again, it's just fantasy-wise, you're going to get production. NFL-wise, I think they're going to keep games interesting. Survivor-wise, nothing is bankable with them. You're going to see them probably kind of similar to Detroit, keep games close. I think stay relevant for 3 quarters, but to expect them to win anything against a team like roughly around their like talent level is going to be like hard pressed to say yes, especially with the injuries. You got Kenny Galladay who can't even practice, and he's like healthy scratches, and not healthy scratches, but he scratches throughout the week, and then you get to actual game day and he's not playing either. It's tough. Tony's like nursing hamstring injuries and stuff like that. Saquon's out, and it's hard to ever take a team like that. Maybe against like Washington or something like that, you could probably get away with the Giants, or maybe the Eagles too. But yeah, I mean, we can't. What are we doing? We saved up enough good teams that we shouldn't have to pick the Giants. All right, Raiders Eagles. Darren Waller didn't play, so I was wrong about Darren Waller torching these linebackers. But I was right in a Raiders tight end torching them. The backup was Moreau. Is it? I think it was Moreau, whoever the backup tight end is. Either way, Derek Carr played him rail, fed him, threw the ball so nicely on the field. I love pocket passers. I love guys that throw it down the field. Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins are doing that this year, but Derek Carr is playing like he's doing that so efficiently, so incredibly. Absolutely love it. And like I said, the Raiders are now bettable for us. They're going to have some really nice matchups coming, and we're going to have to think long and hard about when we can use them. Gruden getting out of that team is one of the best things that could happen. I think simplifying that offense a bit, streamlining it a bit, not complicating it, is going to be super beneficial for Carr, who is showing that he can make all the throws. Now that O-line is terrible, but they are giving him moments of protection, and he's capitalizing on those moments. So similar to Ryan Tannehill working behind a bad O-line right now, he's being good in a good pocket, and it's at a rate that we can rely on, and it's at a rate that we can actually bank on. So that's why I do like the Raiders moving forward. And then the Eagles, Miles Sanders goes down. Doesn't really matter because they weren't even using him, which sucks. I think Miles Sanders is super talented, but as long as Jalen Hurts there, it's just garbage time. It's just it's just all of his points are just all garbage time. I saw a stat the other day or today, 43% of Jalen Hurts' fantasy points have all come in the fourth quarter of his games. So he's just picking up scrambles, he's picking up running TDs and stuff like that at the end of games when teams are just whatever, just damage control, just let's all get out of here without any injuries, let him run it in, don't overstretch and stuff. Josh Jacobs' injury, I think he's week to week right now. I think they're going on to their bye, so that won't affect the Raiders too much. I think that was about it. It's kind of what I said before. This was a good team, bad team situation, so we didn't really learn too much from this one. And just like this next game, we didn't really learn anything from that. Cardinals, Texans, good team, bad team. Kyler Murray is the most efficient, one of the best QBs in the league right now. He's looking at AJ Green. He's spraying the ball around, which is what we like to see. That's what I want to make note of. So Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury have been spreading the ball around so much between DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, using both running backs, and even trying to run Kyler Murray a bit has been awesome. And the reason I talk about that is I use the Cardinals this week, but for weeks moving forward, whenever they have a good matchup, you don't have to worry too much about other defenses being cornerback X will take out receiver Y, cornerback Z will take out receiver Q, and so on and so forth, because all receivers on the Cardinals depth chart are relevant and will be relevant in games. And then you have the addition of Zach Ertz, who got absolutely peppered with targets as well this game. Their arsenal just keeps getting bigger. They'll always be efficient with them. Kyler Murray is the most efficient quarterback in the league right now, so they're as safe as it gets when you want to take a good team against somebody right now. I think they're opponent proof as well, just the way that offense is being run with Pretty Boy football, Pretty Boy offense, Cliff Kingsbury's air raid system. Okay, next game, Bucks versus Bears. It's good team versus bad team. Justin Fields, that was what a bad game. But he's a rookie, and he hasn't shown anything new. I mean, this is just what Justin Fields does. He's got to get acclimated to the speed of the game a bit more. It's, you're not going to acclimate during the Tampa Bay game, that's for sure, because their defense is absolutely ruthless. Tom Brady didn't even have a great game, but he still threw 4 touchdown passes. That's what this team is. It's insane. Congratulations to Tom Brady. 600 touchdown passes is an absolutely incredible feat. The Bears couldn't complete a pass. So this is like the opposite of the Cardinals, where they couldn't even zero in on one wide receiver or one tight end. So like their receivers are like, their offense is the opposite of the Cardinals, where there's like just no creativity. There's no scheming. There's nothing there that, makes you feel confident in any game for any player. So we're going to stay away from the Bears as much as we can. And it's actually going to start looking like we're going to pick against the Bears. And it's not because I don't like that defense. That I think the defense still has talent. But if the offense can't move the ball at all, you're going to lose the game. So we're going to start picking against the Bears. Easy win for the Bucs. They are who we thought they were. The Bears are slowly going down on the list. We'll be picking against the Bears. And then the last game, Monday night game, Seattle Seahawks versus the New Orleans Saints. I think it's what we all expected and from the Seahawks. I think it's what we expected from the Seahawks, I should say. Geno Smith being bad, just a really bad quarterback. He had that one drive when he came in the Rams game. And I was just like, oh, maybe there's like pique some interest. But then, no, Geno Smith, this showed why he's been a backup and why he's like, not a very good backup. Couldn't hit Tyler Lockett, hit DK Metcalf twice. I don't know like why they can't use their weapons. I think the Seahawks team is just a really bad team, honestly. Pete Carroll, there's no coaching there that like will improve the talent that they have. Like I think Pete Carroll's a good coach, but I don't think he can make chicken salad out of chicken shit, which is basically what you're dealing with that Seahawks roster. And then on the defensive side too, I've talked about this as well. They are one of the worst defenses in the league outside of maybe like Bobby Wagner. And it hurts me to say because I think Jamal Adams is super talented and I really like Jamal Adams as a player. But he's used so inappropriately. He isn't producing and he's so overpaid, and you gave up how many draft picks? They still don't have a draft pick in this coming draft because of what they gave up for Jamal Adams, and he's doing nothing for your team. So as long as Russell Wilson's out, we're going to be picking against the Seahawks. And that's how it's going to be. I think they got one more game before their bye, so we're going to look at in our week preview. We're going to think long and hard about who they're playing this week. And then on the other side, the Saints, I thought we were going to be able to use the Saints as a bettable team. But then you only see them put up 10 points or whatever. And I'm just like, well, Sean Payton hasn't learned his lesson. Because if Jameis Winston can't throw on the Seahawks defense, then I can't rely on Jameis Winston to throw on any defense. Because you just heard what I said about the Seahawks defense. And I don't think Jameis Winston's Derek Carr. I really don't think he is. But I think he's good enough to complete more passes and do more damage than, like whatever he thought was like good enough against the Seahawks, which somehow was enough to get a win. It was just mind-boggling that how are you not airing it out? How are you not like just testing that defense more? So it's less Jameis Winston, it's less Alvin Kamara, it's less like their receivers and stuff. It's more Sean Payton. He's kind of got to figure it out. Coach your team up, coach your team to understand that this is the game plan that we're going for. But yeah, that's my review of week 7. Like I said, guys, we're about half a week through, so if you're still alive in your Survivor, like, good stuff. This is awesome. Hopefully a lot of people are dropping out of your leagues, not yourself. But we're going to do a really good breakdown now of like what's remaining. Probably get another map going of some of the games we're going to start picking for like who we can use every week. But yeah, really liking the way this is going. Really like that a lot of our predictions are coming true too. So we've kind of been in lockstep with what the league is. We haven't really taken any too big of gambles. Most of the big things that you guys have been suggesting in the comics have all like paid off too. So you guys are super smart. I'm learning a lot from what things you suggest as well. So thank you guys so much for that. But yeah, tomorrow I'll have my week preview, and I'll also be doing my top 3 games I love, top 3 games I hate. So have a good one, guys. See ya.